Welcome back to the Everyday Grief Podcast. I'm Dr. Anitra Manning, the Everyday Grief Coach, and I am, of course, a grief coach, a seminarian, and companion in the sacred work of loss, change, reimagining, and becoming. This is the second episode in our series called You Are Not a Line Item. It's called A New Story for a Closed Door. And in episode 1, we talked about the raw, unspoken grief of layoffs, the shame, the disorientation, and the subtle but sacred work of reclaiming your voice. If you haven't listened just yet, I want to invite you to pause this particular episode and begin there, because in that episode, I lay out the emotional and spiritual groundwork for what we are going to talk about today. And I want to tell you that in my first episode in this series, what I'm really talking about is how we really begin to become empowered by the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we tell others. And we're going to continue to build on that today and in the next episode. So we're going to explore something today that you probably know a little bit too well, that after the layoff, after that last email, after the goodbye, you are left with a really searing question. What do I say now? And this is, again, not just to you, because that story you tell yourself is really important, but so is the story you're going to tell others, right? So I want to invite you to be crystal clear about the stories that you are engaging in this time of transition, in this time of change, in this time where you are really encountering the reality of who you are post-layoff. So when I was laid off, I lost more than a title. I lost the rhythm of my workday, the community that I was a part of, the people you get on Zoom with, the people that you meet up with for lunch, for coffee, for tea. I lost the vision that I've been holding on to for my career. I saw myself having a particular trajectory at the organization, and I communicated that with the way that I talked about the role, of the way I talked about that job as well with my family, with my friends. I saw myself as being there over the long term. I don't know that that's a popular thing these days, to really see yourself building a career at a company, at an organization, but that was certainly where I was. And I just remembered the awkward and silent space in this time of in-between, when people are asking you things like, so what's next? And I don't really have an answer. You don't have an answer that that feels true and that feels bearable for you. So many of us will say something kind of cliche and trite, like, I'm in transition. And you know in your heart that's not enough, because it does not hold the grief. It doesn't honor the faith that it took to get up and breathe to even say that statement. And it does not reflect the tears, the ache, the identity questions that you're asking. And here's what's made it even more complicated. It wasn't just holding my grief. I wasn't just holding my grief. I was holding the grief of others too, because when I had been laid off, I knew that there were others who were laid off. I knew there were others at the company that were mourning my loss of a job, because they knew that their work life would change because I wasn't in my old position. And I was supporting and ministering some of them. And so they were crying, and they were asking how this could happen, telling me how wrong it felt, how shocked that they were. And they were asking me questions too. And they're probably asking you questions. How are you handling this so well? I remember my last manager, the one who performed the layoff, asking, how am I handling this so well? What's keeping you grounded? How are you not falling apart? And although I had a strength and a peace I could not describe to you if I had all the words, I will say I had the peace, but at the same time, I was also hurting. And I was hurting deeply because, again, that vision I had was not going to be able to come to fruition. I was still waking up wondering, did that really happen? Because, again, the shock will come and I'm still wondering, did that really happen? But because I'm a coach, because I'm a leader, someone known for holding space, I found myself helping them process my layoff while carrying the ache of it myself. Have you done that? Have you also been in that position of you're the one who is going through the injury, the hurt, the layoff, and yet you are still finding a way to help someone else? So, and I believe I'm not alone. Many of us do the same thing. And when we are women, when we are caregivers, when we are community builders, we carry the weight of others' grief while ignoring our own. So what winds up happening is that we are in a position of supporting others through their grief journey. You are grieving, and somehow acknowledging and being present to the grief of others doesn't give you the space to fully deal with your own personal grief. And that's where I was. So a lot of times we will really go through this whole phase where we are trying to cover and mask. So we are attending to someone else's grief. We're not dealing with our own. And then we also are talking to others in small sound bites because we are not comfortable letting them into our story, believing that there's no one that can truly understand where we are. So we'll say things like, again, I'm transitioning or I'm pivoting. I am taking some time out. I'm in between things. But I want to be very, very honest with you. As they say, hear me with your good ear. You are not in transition. You are in transformation. Those two things simply are not the same thing. Transition is a word that we use when we want to stay tidy, but it leaves out the heartbreak, the rage, the concern, the anger, the bitterness, the sadness, the disappointment, the uncertainty, the sacred confusion. According to Mary Frances O'Connor, grief is our brain's way of adapting to a loss that feels impossible. And if you resonate with that, you probably will remember or are in the experience of now of trying to adapt in the midst of something that you just didn't believe could actually happen. And then it really does. But we've got to be able to tell the truth about what happened. And if we don't tell the truth, if we don't speak about what really happened in a thoughtful way and don't tell ourselves what really happened, we never let our brain, we never let our soul recognize what really happened. And we don't give our brain, our soul, the opportunity to reorganize. You see, reorganize around what actually happened. Andy Ho reminds us that our story isn't just what happened, it's what we believe about what happened. And if we keep telling edited stories, we start to internalize that silence. Your story deserves to be true, not just palatable. So a lot of times we're editing our stories because we want someone else to be able to hear us, but not have shame. You want someone to hear what happened, but not ask too many questions. You want to keep yourself emotionally safe. And that emotional safety is understandable because it hurts so much. Your heart is open. That rejection never, ever feels welcome or good. But I want to invite you to consider this differently. And we're going to do this work over the next few episodes. First, I want to take a little time to dig into some wisdom about this. And I want to go into some scripture for a moment because these are not new questions that we're asking ourselves. We're not the first one trying to edit stories, trying to do some self-soothing. trying to recover as a solo act of one in the work of recovery. But it is through the Bible that we meet women who had to rewrite their story and rewrite the story that others, either they said it or they were collectively performing, that they wanted that person, they wanted the women to perform a certain way. And so I want to give you some additional perspective, and I hope that you will hear yourself in the story or hear someone that you know. So I want to talk about Hannah. And in Hannah's story, which is in 1 Samuel 1:1, and we hear about her as one who was being mocked, or she thought she was being mocked. She was someone that was being dismissed, either real or in her mind. She thought she was being dismissed. And I'm saying that I'm giving some additional editorials there because depending on how you read the story in the Hebrew, it is possible that Peninnah was not truly the one who was mocking Hannah, but Hannah had an interpretation of what the rival wife was saying. Hannah was mocked, dismissed, and considered broken because in her social context, to not be childbearing was something that was making her less than what her economic and social function would dictate. So she had lived with this unmet longing also in her for years. She wanted to be a mother. She wanted to be a contributing member of the social order that she was in. And then one day she did break the silence. She changed up how she saw everything. And she went to the temple and she had prayer. And she wept. And she cried from the very depths of her soul. You know the story. She was also one that when she went, she wept and cried so loudly in her soul that her voice was not audible. You could not hear anything. She was in anguish. And even when she was misunderstood by the priest Eli, she didn't stop because she had reached a point where hiding her grief wasn't an option. Her new story began the moment she stepped into the temple, and she stopped performing strength. She did not have to look like everything was okay. I want to talk about the woman with the alabaster jar. She entered a room that she wasn't necessarily welcomed in. She didn't bring words. She brought her presence, her grief, her sacred offering. She poured out her soul and poured out her oil and her vulnerability onto the feet of Jesus. You see, she was someone that was socially rejected in the house that she was in. And when she was judged for doing what was in her heart to do, rejected by the people, not by Jesus, Jesus says she has done a beautiful thing. Her new story began the moment she chose herself and brought her whole truth into the room. Now I want to talk about Mary of Bethany. While her sister Martha worked and served and stayed busy, Mary sat. She chose presence over productivity. And when others told her she should be doing more, Jesus says she has chosen the better part. Her new story began when she stopped hustling and trusted the rest and presence were enough. So these women didn't receive new jobs, but they were offered new titles. They weren't offered new titles. They didn't receive new jobs. They weren't offered new titles, but they were giving new language, new clarity, new witness. And that's what you're being invited into now. So I'm going to walk through how do you build a story that honors your grief and preserves your dignity using a grief-informed, narrative-centered model. So first, we're going to name what happened. I want you to be able to say what happened without needing to be perfect. So you don't need to have the perfect story. I was laid off. It hurt. It surprised me. I'm still learning how to speak about it now. And that's a shift because we're taught not to share the things that most concern us. We're taught to hide. But here I'm inviting you to step into your truth, to tell others this is what exactly happened. You can be brief, but share it. No need to hide the story, to be in shame. Honor what it meant. Honor what it meant. This is where your heart belongs in the story. That job wasn't just a job. It was a community. It was identity. It was purpose. I got a lot out of that experience. I didn't think my job would end. I felt so much purpose and I felt it was my assignment, my divine assignment to be there. But as you're sharing this, I want you to begin to think about how you discern who gets to hear that story, because not everyone gets access. And I want you to use discernment. Do they stay present as you're telling the story? Do they reflect your dignity in the way they're responding? Do they ask any questions of you with compassion and with curiosity? Do they look at you with earnestness? Do they step towards you, not from you? So before you go any further in your story, assess how you are unpacking your truth for the people you're talking to. Alan Wolfelt says that grief must be witnessed, but only by those who can hold it well. You're going through a lot when you are in a post-layoff scenario. Some people cannot hold that well because it's actually a story about them and not about you. This is the story that you also see in Hannah's story. Elkanah makes it about him. Many of us, when we're in our grief journeys, we are actually asking others to decenter their narrative. But many times they're still centering their narrative because they might fear getting laid off. They don't hear your story. Because they fear that they're not enough to meet your moment. They can't hear your moment. They can't hear your grief. Because they are overwhelmed with what's going on in their lives. They only wanted the edited version of how you're doing, and now you've told them too much. Because now you are giving them more than they can handle. Any and all of these kind of things can actually be true in any time that you are relaying a story of your grief and a transition of a major change is happening in your life. But you have to be able to hear what people are telling you and know that you still do need a witness. You need a community to hear your story, but not everybody can do that. I want you to also ask for what you need. Don't just speak your story. I want to invite you to build connection. Try saying things like, can I share something I'm not ready to fix yet? You may not want to hear anybody's solutions. I know when I've been in those situations of change, transition related to a layoff on other areas of my life, I wasn't exactly ready to hear someone offer a solution because I was still in the grips of the fear and the grief, the loss itself. I was having this experience of deep loss. And so when someone gives you a solution, it doesn't make you feel like you've been heard. And so if you're out there and you want to help someone that you know and love through their time of grief and transition, I want to invite you to be present to their story. That also may include multiple levels of grief, particularly theologically. People will begin to wonder, where is God? And the important thing for you to do in this moment is to let the story be. How they're speaking of God, let it be. Don't try to change it or shift it by saying God knows best or God is in control. All these narratives that spiritually bypass where that person actually is, let them tell you what they need and what they're saying. So it's going to require that you listen extremely well and with heart, right? Build the connection. Here's what I want to invite you to do as you're communicating your story. I want you to also ask a question. Not only can I share something I'm not ready to fix yet, but also say, would you be willing to walk with me through this? See, when you say, would you be willing to walk with me through this? You're not saying to that person that I know what I need yet. But you're saying, can you walk with me? Can you be my friend, my companion? Is that something you can do? Would you be willing? You're acknowledging that you don't want to stand alone on this. You don't want to be alone on the island of grief. You know that you need support. And oftentimes what happens in our social order is that we allow people to become isolated and we do not speak to what we actually do need, which is we need someone. But how do we ask someone for what we need without feeling shame and pity? And I'm giving you a way that you can do that. Ask a question like, would you be willing to walk with me through this? You can say something like, I am not okay. And I don't need advice. I need presence. I need you to just be here. Ask for what you need, because immediately you're not going to need advice. And if you do ask for advice before time, it just won't feel right. It won't set well with you. If no one has told you this lately, your story isn't over. Your grief isn't shameful. Your voice matters, even when it trembles. It may feel shaky. Stay with it. You don't have to carry anything related to your layoff alone. And you don't have to keep shrinking your experience down for other people's comfort. This is the work I hold. I help people to reclaim their story, help them to grieve in full color and not in silence. If you're navigating grief after a layoff, or if your soul has moved on, but your heart is still holding the pain, I'd be honored to work with you. My website is simply this, www.everydaygriefcoach.com. There you can learn about me and what I bring to this work. I bring 25 years in HR, so I know the kind of ways that grief can shape the ways you think about your career and yourself. I bring expertise around change management, organizational behavior, deep work with working with executives and professionals around change. And I'm also a theologian. And I'm very, very concerned about how we talk about God in the midst of our loss. And it is something that we escape because we think we can stop talking to God because you feel like God has stopped talking to you. So I want to invite you to explore a relationship that we can get together and build up so that you have what you need to retell your story, to tell your story differently to yourself and to others. And it takes some coaching to do that. I'm not a therapist. So my work is really around how you move toward where you need to go, which is around the healing journey through how you process your grief spiritually and emotionally, but also how you begin to create a new story, a new path forward. That's the work of coaching. And I want to build this new story with you. So I'm going to give you a closing blessing. As you think about everything we've talked about today, May you stop shrinking your story to make others comfortable. Your job in this is not to make others comfortable, but to discern what's going on. So I want to make sure that you hear this very, very well. I'm going to start this closing blessing again. May you stop shrinking your story to make others comfortable. May your grief be honored, not hidden. May your voice return one word at a time. And may every closed door become a sanctuary of truth and transformation. In our next episode, we'll be expanding the conversation and we'll talk about grief of the marketplace. We'll name the collective moral injury caused by layoffs and disconnection and talk about how we heal not just individually but communally. Until then, I want you to tell the truth. I want you to live your story and remember, you are not a line item. You are a life, and your life still matters. Be well. This is Dr. Anitra, the Everyday Grief Coach, and I hope that you'll join me for our next episode, The Grief of the Marketplace. Keep listening, keep shining, and live well.